The year is 2001 and it's a warm Friday evening nearing the strike of midnight. You're channel hopping, slowly flicking between the television channels BBC, ITV, Channel 4 and the still relatively new Channel 5. As you hit the fifth channel, a film catches your attention. Images of a nighttime cityscape dominated by highways and skyscrapers, neon lights and plush executive offices. A man and a woman enter. They're well dressed, smart. They come closer and closer together. Their clothes start to peel off. The noise of a saxophone purrs in the background. Fixated, you stay tuned in to Channel 5 as the clock strikes midnight. Many of us came of age during this pre-Wi-Fi era of soft smarts. A very different experience compared to the uninhibited, uncensored, on-demand times that we find ourselves in now. This wave of steamy thrillers released during the late 80s to the mid-90s embody elements of romance, mystery, paranoia, lust, and danger. Never before had intimacy and death been so closely linked. But what happened to these movies? As by the late 90s, they seem to have mostly fizzled out. A victim of changing public attitudes maybe? Or of advance in technology and the way we consume explicit media? From silk sheets to search bars, broadcasts to bookmarks, this is the story of the late Friday nights on Channel 5 and the bygone era of the erotic thriller. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today there's no messing around, we're going to get straight into the video, so here we go.
And you're here with a strange girl being a naughty boy?
I don't think having dinner with anybody's a crime.
Not yet.
Released in September of 1987, Fatal Attraction was a huge box office success, taking in $320 million against a budget of just $14 million. An erotic thriller starring Michael Douglas and Glenn Close, it became the second highest grossing film in the US that year. Though the first big financial hit of the genre, it was far from the first of its type. The erotic thriller traces both its narrative and stylistic roots back to 1940s and 50s film noir, plus Hitchcock's run of thrillers during the 1950s. Several giallo films, which I believe I'm pronouncing correctly, from the 1960s and 70s, most notably One on Top of the Other, are also thematic precursors to the genre. Some erotic thrillers even take inspiration from ancient Greek tragedies, primarily themes of lust, deceit, shame, and the downfall of an ill-gained power. 1998's Wild Things, for example, pulls much of its influence from the 4th century BC tragedies Medea and Hippolytus. I think I might have also pronounced them wrong as well. The fundamental components that make up an erotic thriller are just what its name implies: sex and suspense. Themes of illicit romance, infidelity, criminality, voyeurism, fetishism, conspiracy, mystery, and murder are all staples of the genre, though most important is the constant tension between intimacy and danger that runs throughout almost all movies within the genre. The 1980s opened with a series of films that sat both adjacent to and within the early erotic thriller mould. Cruising, Dressed to Kill, American Gigolo, Body Heat, Bedroom Eyes, Body Double, Crimes of Passion, Jagged Edge, Tightrope, and 9.5 Weeks acts as almost proto-variants of the genre, all featuring various individual elements that make up the core foundation of an erotic thriller. After the success of Fatal Attraction in 1987, many other studios quickly greenlit screenplays within the genre. A slew of movies, some with big names attached, and starring roles, hit the cinemas during the late 1980s and early 90s. These included Dangerous Love, Wild Orchid, Presumed Innocent, Shattered, Consenting Adults, and the fourth highest grossing film of 1992, Basic Instinct, which also starred Michael Douglas. Court case dramas, workplace politics, small town conspiracies, big city thrillers. What they all had in common was that sexuality and seductiveness underscored all proceedings. But whilst these films were doing good numbers at the box office, they were also performing really well in the home video market, particularly through rentals. Many studios saw this opportunity and quickly set about producing a ton of smaller, less expensive films with more risque content that could totally bypass cinema distribution and head straight to the home video market. Here in the UK, video stores were prohibited from selling R18 certificate movies. These are films that, due to their more extreme content, exceed the regular BBFC 18 certificate and are only sold in specialist shops. Due to the softer, less graphic content of these straight-to-video erotic thrillers though, they could push up against the limit of a regular 18 certificate while staying within its confines and thus be sold in regular stores. They could also assume the facade of conventional thrillers, allowing the viewer to rent or purchase a movie without the embarrassment associated with buying regular pornography. They would just fly off the shelves, said former COO of Blockbuster, Gary Weber. We were able to buy the direct-to-video VHS cassettes for a lot less than the theatrically released product. We were able to stock them and put a healthy quantity in the stores, pay a lot less and get a much higher return on investment. Weber said that in regards to rental figures, that of all the genres, erotic thrillers rated at the top. The financial triumph of 1990s softcore erotic thriller Night Eyes formed the blueprint for many subsequent home video productions, with the period from the late 80s to the late 90s becoming an almost golden age for the genre. During this time, over 700 erotic thrillers were produced, with the vast majority of them heading directly to home video. In sheer size alone, the home video erotic thriller is one of the largest American film movements of the 20th century, yet it has demanded way less academic observation than many other film genres. Many of these straight-to-home videos tried to replicate the structure of more mainstream erotic thrillers, like, for example, Fatal Attraction, even down to the adjective space noun naming convention for their titles. Examples of this naming convention include bodily harm, cold sweat, criminal passion, dangerous indiscretion, deadly innocence, evil obsession, final analysis, forbidden games, hidden obsession, illicit behaviour, intimate obsession, judicial consent, mortal passions, and striking resemblance, just to name a few. That relationship we spoke earlier of between sex and danger is directly baked into many of these titles. Some even went so far as to include the exact words instinct, attraction, and or fatal in their title to try and replicate the success of Basic Instinct or Fatal Attraction. These movies include Animal Instincts, Killer Instinct, Fatal Exposure, Fatal Charm, Fatal Bond, Fatal Past, Night Eyes 4, Fatal Passion, Fatal Pursuit, Fatal Temptation, Dangerous Attraction, Animal Attraction. Yeah, you get the point. There's a lot of films trying to rip these large productions off.
Looking for something in particular? No, I think I've already found it.
Now, there's a real distinction between the two types of erotic thriller, and both sit at either ends of a spectrum. The larger budget productions would usually feature a dominant narrative that was inherently sexual in nature, with scenes of sex underpinning and informing the larger story. Whereas on the other hand, the smaller home video releases tended to feature multiple extended sex scenes, with then a loose narrative threaded between each instance of nudity, maintaining the illusion of a traditional thriller, whilst really being an excuse just to see some TNA action. So the story is kind of just there to legitimise our watching of softcore porn. It's like our get out of jail free card if we're ever caught consuming one of these movies. This allowed us all to collude in the illusion that we were purchasing or renting these movies under its thriller guise. Some of the bigger budget erotic thrillers of the day feature hardly, if any, extended sex scenes or nudity. For example, in 1994's Disclosure, which is also starring Michael Douglas and Demi Moore, a film about a former love interest trying to frame our lead over a non-consensual workplace tryst, has just one brief scene of intimacy as its inciting incident, yet the entire movie revolves around this brief entanglement. Michael Douglas himself was a bit of a mainstay of the genre, starring in Fatal Attraction, Basic Instinct, Disclosure and A Perfect Murder. And whilst many other big names were attached to the more mainstream outings, the home video scene had its own recurring stars. Canadian model and actor Shannon Tweed starred in around 25 of these movies during this time frame, becoming almost the industry face of erotic home video productions. Shannon Worry, Maria Ford and Tanya Roberts were also reoccurring performers and went as so far as to star in each other's films. The success of these videos led to cable TV in the States and non-terrestrial TV here in the UK to start broadcasting some of these movies. Cinemax even gained the colloquial nickname Skinemax in reference to its Max After Dark broadcasting, which showed various direct-to-TV erotic thrillers. They even broadcast their own erotic TV show anthology, Hotline, in 1995, where listeners of a fictional radio show called in to recount their most wild sexual exploits. Hotline comprised of individual 30-minute episodes and featured many of the day's most well-known stars. Over here in the UK, cable and satellite channels had been showing the odd direct-to-TV erotic thriller, but without the install base of terrestrial channels, they failed to make much of an impact. That was all about to change though, as in March 1997 a new TV channel was set to debut in the United Kingdom, extending the current availability of 4 channels to 5, and bringing with it the introduction of late night movies on a Friday. Channel 5 were bringing the erotic thriller to the small screen. It's kind of crazy to think back to 1997 and remember that we had just 4 TV channels to choose from. Even more incredible is that some channels, including BBC 1 and 2, would cease broadcasting at night, displaying test card F throughout the early hours of the morning. During the later part of the 90s and even into the 21st century, BBC would replace test card F with pages from CFAX. I have many memories of waking up late in the middle of the night and quietly turning on the television and being greeted with the blocky glow of teletext, itself accompanied by the sounds of soft jazz. Channel 5, which had debuted in March 1997, decided to do their late night programming a little differently. By 1998, they had been regularly showing the erotic TV shows Sex and Shopping and Real Sex, continuing with the HBO imports G-String Divas and Red Shoe Diaries. These were broadcast on a post-Watershed Thursday night, and by 2002 had led to a measurable increase in nudity on British television. Sex scenes have more than doubled from 6% to 14% since 1999, says the survey by the Broadcasting Standards Commission, the Independent Television Commission, and the BBC. But it was late Friday nights where Channel 5 really shone. Now, Channel 5 wasn't really the biggest success when it first launched. There were some teething issues, but it was Friday nights where the channel would really shine. A wave of low-budget American softcore erotic thrillers would take over the airwaves. Every Friday night from 11 PM onwards, like clockwork, they would bust out the very best outings from Shannon Tweed, Maria Ford, Shannon Worry, or Tanya Roberts. Mirror Images, Sins of Desire, Body Chemistry, Naked Lies, Mind Twister, and Private Obsession. Friday nights after 11 PM became an almost rite of passage, being introduced to sexuality and lovemaking through the soft-focused images of the straight-to-video erotic thriller. Our stars inhabiting a world where everyone was seemingly wealthy and seemingly horny. But through their ridiculousness, there was something soothing, almost romantic. We spoke about these films in school, some boys acting out parts to laughter. But it wasn't until our friends outside the school began speaking of them that I comprehended their reach. The ridiculousness of it struck me, how there were probably thousands of us, but we were all inevitably hidden from the adult world then. If these films were anything to go by, adults needed sexual satisfaction arguably as much as we did. Now in the 80s, Channel 4 themselves had tried a similar strategy, and these broadcasts were preceded with a red triangle, though the success wasn't really measurable, and by 1987 they had stopped broadcasting the red triangle movies.
Listen, Herc, I'm going to go to the ladies' room, but I would really love to dance with you some more later.
Maybe I could use a little fresh air myself.
By the end of the century, the Broadcasting Standards Commission had denounced the late-night erotic dramas shown on Channel 5 as eroding the standards of UK television. English singer and actor Adam Faith's last words on his deathbed were famously, "Channel 5 is all shit, isn't it? Christ, the crap they put on there, it's a waste of space." By 2003, new leadership at the channel had decided to put an end to the Friday night screenings. But this brief period proved to be an important one to many young, impressionable viewers in their formative years. In an age today where immediate access to online content that is infinitely more extreme and more readily available, one has to wonder whether growing up in the age of the erotic thriller was a better introduction to sex and intimacy than what many young people have today. Los Angeles. The air seems thick, a mix of smog and heat. Soft focus, a shallow depth of field. When I was younger, there was a rumour that these movies were shot with Vaseline on the lens to give them that soft, almost blurry look. LA here in these movies seems almost dreamlike. We've explored LA before in a few of the other videos, but in these specific movies, LA has a real unique feel to it, a sexiness. Maybe it's because of the budget constraints some of these productions were limited by. Some were even shot elsewhere and used stock or previously shot footage of LA for establishing shots. Characters inhabit a distinctly adult LA, a mature world, free of domestic responsibilities. A world where everyone is working late at the office, where men hit the gym and women always wear expensive lingerie. Everyone smokes, everyone drinks, and everyone owns a gun. As a kid in my local Blockbuster, these movies occupied the top shelf. Their titillating VHS covers always sucked me into their sensual, provocative world. What the hell was going on in these movies? And who were these gorgeous women, I always wondered. Everything about this era of erotic thrillers feels so sophisticated, so executive, far removed from the sleazy pornos of the 1970s that were to some extent precursors to the erotic thriller genre. This world of the late 80s and the early 90s was extremely different to the previous decade. 70s porn flick narratives, where they existed at all, tended to embody the ethos that the debut of the birth control pill the decade prior equaled pleasure without regret. The erotic thriller offered pleasure with a cost, and sometimes the greatest possible cost imaginable, the loss of human life. You see, in a decade where AIDS was very much at the forefront of public attention, casual sex still came packaged with ideas around danger, guilt, and death. There was a dualistic relationship between sex and death. Never before had they been so entwined, and this played out in the worlds of these erotic thrillers. Bodily danger and pleasure must remain in close proximity. Many of these films take their visual cues and cinematography from European cinema, but unlike their European counterparts, where nudity and intimacy were more open and inconsequential, sex could only exist in American cinema when juxtaposed against death, always tying sex to its sinful nature. Promiscuous characters are normally killed off, whilst monogamous characters survive until the end credits. 1980s Cruising, directed by William Friedkin, explicitly explores sex and death, with Pacino searching for an elusive killer among New York's gay scene. Multiple actors portrayed the shadowy killer, even those who had played his victim in previous scenes. Have sex once and you become a killer, a not so subtle nod to themes of disease and infection. Within the erotic thriller, when women take ownership over their sexuality, this is usually presented in the form of a femme fatale character, a common trope within the genre. Many sexually independent women serve ultimately to manipulate our male lead, or to punish men who dare to have a casual fling. 1995 Species takes the femme fatale to the nth degree, literally portraying this archetypal character as a man-eating human-alien hybrid. Femme fatales are presented as having to make up for their physical weaknesses by being conniving, secretive, or Machiavellian, and are normally met with death upon being exposed. Back to 1998's Wild Things, which actually departs from this, it gives us initially unassuming femme fatale character who manages to flip the script on our male lead, whilst The Last Seduction reverses the typical perspective and allows us to view the world from her viewpoint, blurring the lines between protagonist and antagonist. The erotic thriller embodied much of the aspiration and optimism of the 90s, along with many of its flaws. Limited character diversity means we see a very specific slice of American eroticism in regards to race and sexuality. And though there are a good amount of films that feature queer intimacy, this is normally presented squarely from and within the male gaze. David Cronenberg's Crash does feature a rare moment of two dudes embracing, whilst 1996 Bound is without a doubt the best example of lesbian romance, where the on-screen chemistry isn't just designed for straight bros. The portrayal of women, though not exactly amazing and being very reflective of the era in which these films were made, still though feels way more favourable than what we see today in an age of immediate accessible online pornography. A far cry from the golden age of the erotic thriller and from those late nights on a Friday evening.
So, what'd you think?
I think you're even sexier with your clothes on.
Does that mean I can spend the night?
Only if you promise to respect me in the morning.
I promise to be horny in the morning.
Works for me.
In 1990s In the Cold of Night, Scott Bruin is a Malibu photographer who spends most of his time photographing half-naked women and living in a studio with this weird glowing bed, until one day he meets the girl of his dreams. And I mean literally, he's been dreaming about this girl for the entire first act of the movie. Within a short time, her clothes are off and they're at it in a weird puddle of marbles. You see, the women of these erotic thrillers may have had very little agency and at times been exceptionally passive, so I'm not exactly calling them feminist icons by any means, but in comparison to what we have access to today in regards to online video content, the Shannon Tweeds and the Tanya Roberts of the industry seem almost like symbols of women's liberation. In stark contrast to the graphic scenes of sex found on many of today's porn sites, the brief moments of intimacy found in the golden age of the erotic thriller seems, at least, passionate, consensual, and at times genuinely romantic. Yeah, they may have not been realistic or wholly reflective of real-world experiences, but these movies are a whole lot more authentic than what we see over on Pornhub. Sometimes all of the stuff leading up to and around the act of intercourse can be just as sexy as the sex itself. And this is the climate or the space in which the erotic thriller thrives in. It blooms in these in-between spaces between desire and danger, good and bad, sex and death. These movies show us so much more, all the whilst showing us very, very little.
I've never seen a gun. Up close, I mean.
With my sidearm in a service.
Do you mind?
Sure. Be careful, it's loaded.
Does it have much of a kick?
Some. It could be dangerous.
As the 90s wore on, the erotic thriller boom of the beginning of the decade began to wane. There were excursions and crossovers into other genres, such as the paranormal, with films like Doppelganger, The Girl on the Swing, Spellbinder, I'm Dangerous Tonight, which is a direct-to-TV movie about a haunted dress, Meridian, Death Dancers, Double Threat, and Serpent's Lair. After the success of 1992's The Lawnmower Man, the erotic thriller genre also crossed over into science fiction, yielding many movies with a virtual reality theme that was very popular at the time, such as New Rose Hotel, Electra, Access Denied, Hard Drive, Virtual Desire, Virtual Girl, Virtual Obsession, and Virtual Seduction, plus Disclosure, which has this pretty hilarious VR scene towards the end. 1991's Liquid Dreams, an erotic thriller sci-fi mystery about a seedy futuristic strip club, bears striking similarities to Cronenberg's Videodrome. An early scene in the movie upon which our blonde lead Candy Staley discovers a body in a dishevelled apartment, dead from a drug overdose, would eerily mirror her own fate just a decade later. By the end of the century, the erotic thriller was facing its own demise. With the new millennium, the internet had pretty much become the default mode of viewing explicit content. In the wake of being able to access images and later videos for free, how was the home video market of saucy low-budget thrillers meant to survive? By the early noughties, the whole scene had pretty much dried up. Now, there have been some recent escapades into the realms that touch upon the erotic thriller convention, all that feature narratives that revolve around sexuality and intimacy. Larger big budget studios just seem way too risk averse to dive into this world of sex and mystery. When Disney, Universal and Paramount are reluctant to even fund or create new mainstream intellectual property, the chances of them producing straight up erotic thrillers seems less probable. The days of seeing big stars on the level of Harrison Ford, Madonna, Bruce Willis, Demi Moore, our boy Michael Douglas, Sharon Stone or Richard Gere doing extended intimate nude scenes seem so far away. I'm infinitely grateful to have grown up with Channel 5 and catching the very tail end of the golden age of the erotic thriller, as I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like to be a young person online nowadays. The impact of the erotic thriller may be slight, but it is undoubtedly felt in the few ventures we so rarely get into the genre today. I feel that this era of romantic home video deserves a revisit. Those dreamy LA skylines of the 80s and the 90s still live forever in my head. A steamy world vivid in colour and a Vaseline smeared lens, creating a glow that echoes passionately beyond a brief golden age. So that was it. Thank you so much for getting to the end of the video. As always, all of the references and citations are in the description below, so you can find them there. I also just wanted to say that, as you probably know, it's becoming increasingly difficult for smaller channels like myself to get noticed on YouTube and to get any kind of traction. So any type of interaction that you have with this video, whether that be liking it or commenting or even subscribing to the channel, all of that really helps small channels like myself grow. I hope you enjoyed everything you saw. If this is the first time that you've come to my channel, then feel free to check out some of my other videos which are kind of done in a similar style. And with that, I just want to say thank you again for stopping by. I will see you all real soon.